Welcome, everybody, to another awesome podcast. It is Rock Talk with DocRocker. I'm Jeff Bonomo, joined with the DocRocker himself, Dan Arlotto. How are you doing on this wonderful Monday night?
This wonderful, cold, chilly Monday night. I'm doing great, Jeff, especially after the weekend of having some thunderstorm-ridden internet connection issue, problematic, all kinds of stuff. We were trying to do this podcast for the last couple of days, but it's been a nightmare to put together. So we finally, we decided, we're just going to pull a little bit of midnight oil on Monday night and we're going to get this done. And we're going to deliver another episode for all of you that are part of the group and tuning in and checking us out. And hopefully those of you that will be checking us out in the future, super excited. So tonight, we're going to do something a little bit different. The last couple of weeks, we've been doing all this kind of gushing and talking about stuff we really enjoy and, covering different styles and genres and, all sorts of underrated, and we did a whole thing on, different singers. And today we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to talk about what we consider to be the worst albums by some of our favorite bands and artists. So we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to do a couple jabs and have hopefully open up the floor a little bit for some debate and create some really interesting conversations.
Yeah, we posted that on our Rock Talk Facebook group over the weekend. What is the worst albums by your favorite bands, pretty much? And we got a ton of response. So
yeah,
a pretty interesting topic. So we'll get to some of them a little bit later. I think we should read through some of the stuff that is on the board on the group, I should say.
Yeah,
the group's going great. I'm looking at it right now, and just keeps on growing and growing, which is great. So if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel yet, subscribe to that. And if you haven't subscribed to our Facebook group, search for Rock Talk with DocRocker Facebook group, and join the discussion. All things rock and heavy metal, and pretty much any kind of rock is allowed. I don't care how mellow it is. I don't care how heavy it is. We just like to talk rock. So we're going to talk about bad albums right now. So let's start.
It's going to be fun.
Let's start with the almighty Black Sabbath, because they're not immune to bad albums. The first one, of course, I have to mention by Black Sabbath is Technical Ecstasy, which came out in 1976. Now, back then, Black Sabbath, to me, was on a roll. It was the self-titled, Paranoid, Master of Reality, Volume 4, Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, Black Sabbath Sabotage. So that's like 6 albums in a row that to me are like fantastic albums. I don't think there's really a bad song on any of those albums. And then, then there's Technical Ecstasy, which you could tell that the band is falling apart by this time. And it just, the album cover alone should tell you what's inside is not very good. It looks like two robots peeing on each other, going up an escalator.
You can tell that they basically got one of Ozzy's feet out the door at this point. That things are at that point due for change.
Absolutely, and there's a lot of experimentation in that album, and none of it's good. I'm sorry, it really.
Hey, it's good on paper, right? You definitely you don't want to knock a band for having an experimental album where they try something different, because it could potentially pull them in a whole totally new direction and do some really awesome stuff. But in this case, unfortunately for Sabbath, it just did not pan out.
No,
it really didn't.
No, the album before it, Sabotage, you could consider that an experimental album, but in the right way. They did some really different things on Sabotage, which was great, but Technical Ecstasy, no. There's a boring piano ballad called It's All Right that the drummer Bill Ward sings. It's terrible. Rock and Roll Doctor is an awful song. The only one I kind of like is Dirty Women, and that's really not that good either. So that's the top of the list, the almighty Black Sabbath. Another album they have that's really bad is called Forbidden. That came out in 1995. That's just bad all over. That was produced by Ernie C. from the band Body Count. And the first song features a rap verse by Ice-T. And I like Ice-T, but I don't think Ice-T with Black Sabbath works. And even the singer at the time, Tony Martin, said that he never believed a Run DMC type rap Sabbath kind of thing is going to work. And Tony Iommi pretty much even disowned the album. Black Sabbath Forbidden,
Oh,
Just
that's really a shame because
yeah,
that's another case where on paper it sounds like that could be something that's really really cool. This collaboration with something that's relatively totally off the wall, genre specific, totally different, and having that work out could have been a really really interesting collaboration. But the fact that it didn't really sell all that well and really please the fans in the way that they might have thought or hoped at the time is really unfortunate because sometimes like a really weird goofy idea like that can totally work and be something really really amazing, so
yeah, well, you
that's
know
sad.
what? Totally strange idea leads right into my next band, Metallica, with Lulu when they teamed up with Lou Reed. Okay, Lou Reed and Metallica. Now that's weird on paper, but like you said, that may have been something really cool, but it's not. It's not. I don't know if you heard Lulu came out in 2011. Metallica and Lou Reed. It's like it's Lou Reed talking over really boring Metallica music, and some of the songs are like 10 minutes long, and
Oh man.
it's rough to get through.
Yeah,
It's
so
rough to
some of
get
their
through.
longer stuff is kind of hit or miss. They're not really the band that's super well known for like big long expansive songs,
Right.
at least
Well,
in my limited experience and exposure to them. I haven't heard all of their albums yet. That's one of my bucket list things of go through like the extent of their discography, the good and the bad.
the older stuff. The older
Yeah.
stuff, like when even like a Justice for All, when they would do longer song structures, it worked. They were really like at their creative height, I think, and they were kind of in the prog vein, really, the progressive metal vein when they did Injustice for All. But Lulu is not the record. The other one by Metallica, which I can't even listen to, is Saint Anger. That's another bomb in the barrel one. The songs are dull, and I mentioned this a few times to you before, and you really need to listen to this just to hear how bad the drum sound is. Go outside and go to your trash can and take a couple drumsticks with you and just bang on it, because that's what it sounds like. It's so bad. The drum sound is so bad I can't even listen to the album. And maybe if they re-recorded the drums and had them sound at least half decent, maybe the
Yeah.
songs would get better.
It's not so much that like the drumming is bad, right? It's just that the drum sound is bad.
It's all bad.
Oh,
I
okay.
can't tell.
Yeah,
It's so
I
bad.
never heard the album. I don't know it, so
I can't tell. It's something I think you should definitely know. You like Death Magnetic, so you
yeah.
like their newer stuff a lot more than I do, but this is not it. Those two albums by Metallica just kind of don't even. Well, maybe check them out if you haven't, just for morbid curiosity.
Yeah. That's a really good way to describe it. If I have a morbid curiosity, I'll probably give it a listen, because I'm definitely curious enough. Like maybe I want to at least hear a song or two just to at least get a sense of how bad it is. But
The drum
yeah,
sound
it's
is
probably one of those albums that I won't listen to start to finish. I probably won't
it's
bother
odd.
to give it the time of day.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll just say the drum sound is odd. That's the nicest way I could put it. It's pretty bad. It's I don't know what they were thinking. And Lars, say what you want about Lars, but I mean, he's a competent drummer, and they have competent producers, and that like this thing had to go past a bunch of different ears before it hit our ears, and
What
everyone's like,
year
"Oh
did
yeah,
it
that's
come out?
great." 2003.
Oh wow.
Anger was
Okay.
2003. Yeah, yeah, and it's just no,
It
no.
doesn't sound like 2003 material.
it doesn't sound like Metallica. It's bad. That's all I gotta say.
It's just bad.
And
Those of you that disagree, fight us on
a
it.
lot of it is the drum sound, though. I think that really kills that album. But I mean, I don't know. There are, if you search on YouTube, hard enough, there are remixes of the album. I know somebody was. I don't know if they ever finished it, but someone was replacing the drums. And I don't know if they did that or not. Kind of like when they added bass into the Injustice for All album. I'm not sure how that project was going or if it even exists. I know somebody was working on that. Maybe it makes the album sound better. I don't know. But, if you talk about Metallica, you got to talk about Megadeth. And Megadeth, to me, has two clunkers. Neither one are as bad as the Metallica ones. We got, of course, Risk from 1999, Megadeth's Risk. Now, there's a few good tunes on that. I don't know if have you ever heard Risk?
No, the only album I heard is I'm blanking on the name of it. We talked about it in a previous
Rust in
episode.
Peace.
Yeah, that
Okay.
one I listened to 2 or 3 times, and that's the only Megadeth album I've ever heard.
Well, they have a few good tunes on Risk, like Crush 'Em is like probably the best tune on there. But overall, that's Megadeth's worst album. I think it's so far removed from Rust in Peace and the other album that came after that, like Countdown to Extinction. That's the one with Symphony of Destruction on it.
Oh, okay.
So it's in that vein of like slowed down kind of heavy metal. Not
decade-old thrash at that point.
Yeah,
like something that's trying to pull itself in a new direction. Like
Right,
I really liked Rust in Peace.
Yeah,
So,
well,
I'm
after
sure I
Rust,
like
after
Countdown
Rust,
to
they
Extinction as
slowed
well.
down.
Mhm.
That they slowed down for a couple albums, but Risk was like them like reaching for like radio, like pop radio play almost. It's just the songs are real simple. It just the hooks aren't there. That one's pretty boring. And the other one by Megadeth I have to mention is Super Collider. That came out in 2013. That's pretty much just bland and lacking anything memorable. It's a lot like Risk. But I have to say, Megadeth came back with the fury with their latest album, which came out a few years ago, Dystopia, which is a true return to form. So I give
Now,
them
when we saw them live in Bethlehem, that was after that came out, right? They featured some of the stuff from that, didn't they?
Yeah.
Okay.
That was their latest. That's their latest.
For me,
album.
like 90% of that concert was new material that I never heard before. Because, like I said, I've only ever listened to Rust in Peace. I mean, I've heard Symphony of Destruction, sure, yeah. But so all that was like totally new material for me, and I really enjoyed it. It was one of those like I really should have gone in like right then and there and listened to a whole bunch of these albums through and through, because I'm sure Megadeth is probably going to be that like pillar of thrash that I gravitate towards as far as thrash is concerned.
Yeah, well, they're I mean, they to me they're the best thrash band.
I get the feeling they're going to be my favorite as well, because I never really got super into Metallica. Like I said, I did And Justice for All, I did Ride the Lightning. I did that Death Magnetic I really liked. I don't know why, because like when you break it down, it's really not super amazing or fantastic, but just something about how the songs are arranged, something about the mix, something about the sound is just something that I really liked. It's one of those
enough.
Yeah, it's solid enough. Like I go to it once in a while and I'm like, hey, this is actually pretty good. And then I like get halfway through it and I'm like, I know why I don't listen to this all the time, but I'll still finish it, but
yeah,
anyway.
it's nowhere near as bad as Saint Anger or Lulu. Lulu's totally bad. Like Lulu is like, I mean, I could listen to Saint Anger maybe if there was different drums, but Lulu, there's nothing good about it. I don't like. Sorry, rock fans. I really don't like Lou Reed to begin with, and the music behind the Lou Reed stuff is just kind of meh, But let's move on to your favorite singer, because I do have a dud in his catalog, Ronnie James Dio. Ooh. I believe he did have a dud of an album. Angry Machine.
I might know what it is. Yeah,
Angry Machine from 1996. To me, it's the only true mediocre album under the Dio moniker. It's like grungy, it's just kind of boring. The second track on it, called Don't Tell the Kids, I really like. It's a real fast, like almost a thrash song, but a thrashy at least. But other than that, Angry Machines didn't do it for me. He's had a few mediocre, a few half decent albums, we'll say. Like Master of the Moon, I don't think it's fantastic, but Angry Machines,
I think enough.
It was, you're right. Angry Machines, I think, was a low point. That came after Strange Highways, which I thought was a really good album. A little different, but still.
Yeah, some of the concepts for Angry Machines is kind of cool. I like the whole like post-apocalyptic, like crazy, like tech robot kind of thing. It's a cool idea. Some of the songs on it are decent, but like, that's bad when like the best ones are decent at best.
That to me is that's the only one I really don't really go back to. I went back to it for this podcast. I went back to all these albums and at least gave a little bit of a listen. And when I did, I'm like, Angry Machines is the one I'm gonna pick. A lot of people will say Magica, but I liked Magica, and I liked the story and the concept that went through.
Yeah, I really didn't like Magica at all. No. That would probably be my vote for the dud of the Dio discography. Because, like I said, I recently discovered. I mean, I have all of his 80s stuff, and then I have Killing the Dragon, and then so I found Master of the Moon. Like, oh, let me check out what was the most recent album. That's pretty awesome. I listened to that. I was like, well, I'm at it. Let me go through and do all this stuff from the 90s and all these other albums that I missed out on. Let me see what they're all about. And I did Angry Machines and was like, it's okay. I did Magica. I don't even think I finished it. I got like maybe about halfway through it and was like, I don't like the direction it took. I thought it was really slow paced and it couldn't hold my attention. And I'm like, it's so focused on like trying to create like this epic thing. And I think the album just kind of gets in its own way, honestly. But that's just my opinion. I didn't.
I can see that. For at that time, Dio was getting really wrapped up with these mid-tempo songs, and it
which could be really effective if they get that nice kind of heavy doomy sound that Dio was later well known for. But when it works fantastically. When it doesn't work, it flops pretty hard.
I would rank Magica up higher than Angry Machines, but I could see where it disinterests you, and I could see that.
I would take that and flip it. I'd put Angry Machines just a little bit above Magica, but they're both like bottom of the barrel for Dio albums.
For Dio,
anything from the '80s, and the last two I think are pretty solid. Killing the Dragon, especially, that one's really, really good.
I have to revisit that one. I know the title track is really, really good.
Yeah, and that's the opener. That's the first song on the album, and then like after that, Along Comes a Spider is really solid. Something going way back to episode 1, I mentioned like my absolute favorite Dio song of all time is on that album. It's called Guilty, and I don't even know if it was a hit or not, but it's just something about like the riff, the chorus, everything about it. Dio's little iconic riffs at the end of it. He does a lot of really interesting stuff with the hook. It's just a solid song, and it's really heavy. And that's just one of many examples on that album of just there's really not a dud on there. It's a really solid album. I think there's only like 10 or 11 tracks, if that. It's kind of short, but like it's concentrated metal. It's really, really well distilled.
Push is on that album too. That's another
Push is really good too. That's another favorite. Mm-hmm.
Now I'm looking at this at the track listing now. It
sounds like something out of the
really
80s.
Great album.
It's like it's got like a real 80s metal vibe to it, and in that I mean in every good way possible.
And he has a nice lineup there on that with Dio on vocals, Doug Aldrich on guitar, Jimmy Bain on bass, which has been his bass player on and off for however long. Simon Wright playing drums. I got to revisit it. I really do, because
I would check it out.
I'm just looking at the track listing now, and I'm like, I like that song, I like that song, I like that song. So that's, as far as his later stuff, that's probably the best one. We're talking about that album,
Master of the Moon. Well, Master of the Moon's good.
Yeah. I'll have to check that one out again. Master of the Moon. I didn't like it at first. It wasn't Angry Machines bad, but
I dug it.
As far as talking about bad albums.
We're talking too much about good albums. Let's keep going.
Here's the next one on my list. This is an interesting little story. Queensryche's album from 2013, Frequency Unknown. Now, at that time in 2013, there were two Queensryches touring and making albums. Two incarnations of the band, both released albums that year. Okay, one was the original singer Jeff Tate with a bunch of hired guns. And if you look at the list, it's a bunch of 80s rockers that he hired to record an album under the Queensryche name. And Queensryche was all the pretty much original members with a new singer who sounded just like Jeff Tate. They released an album that year, which was actually pretty good. The Jeff Tate Queensryche released an album called Frequency Unknown. The album cover was a fist like this with rings, and the rings said F you on it. And it's just bad. It's bad. It's almost like a little kid. It's also like a little spoiled brat was like, these are my toys.
The metal act of the,
Yeah, you're gonna run around with that name that you had before I even joined the band. Well, I'm gonna form my own Queensryche with blackjack and hookers.
And my Queensryche is gonna be better than yours.
And that's what it was.
It's gonna be on the higher part of the sandcastle.
If you followed like the Queensryche music news back then in 2013, it was like that. There were like every day I'd read on Blabbermouth about a different thing that Jeff Tate did, and it was ridiculous.
It's
and
just all spite and rage and fury, I'm sure.
he pulled a knife on the drummer or something,
Oh,
or the
Jesus.
drummer spit on him or something. It
Oh.
was all crazy stuff.
Children.
And the album came out,
Children
and
having
it
a
was
fight.
terrible. What's that?
I was just children having a fight.
Yeah,
Terrible.
but a judge ruled that both bands could be Queensryche, and I don't understand why.
Yeah, that's insane. I can't believe that got passed.
Yeah, so there's two albums that came out in 2013 that are Queensryche.
Well, there's the good Queensryche, and then there's the lousy Queensryche.
Which is weird because he's the voice of Queensryche, but it just is not a good album. It really isn't.
That really sucks. That's a shame.
And like most of their output though, from like 1994 to like 2013, is pretty bad. Like it's but this was the real low point. Like they have a bunch of pretty like mediocre albums from like I'd say The Promised Land, which was their last really good album, on to this 2013 two Queensryches kind of thing going on. Now they did 3 albums since 2013 with their new singer, which they're pretty good. They're solid albums. They're not like it's not like Operation Mindcrime good, but it's pretty good. Now he tours under the name Operation Mindcrime. Jeff Tate's Operation Mindcrime. That's what he does now. I think he released an album called Jeff Tate's Operation Mindcrime, which has nothing to do with Operation Mindcrime that I let you listen to.
Right.
I don't know.
Which just makes it more confusing, and that's frustrating. Yeah. Especially for like an outside someone like me coming in and trying to like get into a band like Queensryche. It's like it's really easy to get confused because there's 2 different bands with the same name. There's an artist by the same name as one of the albums. Then there's a sequel album, Operation Mindcrime 2, and it's like, is that like by the band Operation Mindcrime? No, it's by Queensryche. Is that the one with Jeff Tate? Is that the one without Jeff Tate? Like it's so easy to get mixed up. And
well, the nice thing is if you go see them live, you're either going to see the guys from Queensryche with a new singer that sounds just like Jeff Tate, or you're going to see Jeff Tate with a bunch of hired guns that play old Queensryche songs. So either way,
you're gonna be in for a good show at least.
Yeah,
so,
right.
If nothing else, at least there's a good live market for what you're trying to consume. So that's good.
So, but yeah, Frequency Unknown is another album. Just skip over. By Queensryche. Like I said, I would skip over everything from 1994 to about 2013, 2014. Like that, there's I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 albums in that span of time that they're just really mediocre. But this one's the bottom. This one's like this one's bad.
And that's saying something.
Yeah. There's one, I think it's called American Soldier, that came out like around in the early 2000s, which was half decent, if I remember. There was all songs based upon the military and military life and war and stuff like that. It was pretty heavy stuff. That one, if I remember correctly, was half decent, but there's a lot of them that weren't. Moving on, of course, I got to mention Van Halen 3.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't even going to talk about this one, but my brother-in-law Dom posted it on the Facebook group.
Oh, was it? Because I remember reading somebody commented that, and that was really interesting for me because, like, we did our whole Van Halen episode, and and I kind of came clean and said, like, I really love Eddie as a guitar player, and I love his playing, and I love his style, but I'm really not a big fan of his writing, and I never really got into the band, because I listened to, of course, oh my God, the one with the baby.
1984.
Yeah, so I listened to that, didn't really care for it. I did like a kind of mashup of like some of his greatest stuff, and then got into some of the Sammy Hagar stuff that was kind of cool, and it's like still on my bucket list. And in that episode we mentioned like, oh, maybe Danton should probably go through and listen to Van Halen 3. That might be a solid one that he might really enjoy. And I jumped in like with kind of high expectations and ended up not finishing the album. It couldn't keep my interest. I did like maybe about 5 or 6 songs, and then was like,
And after you checked it out, I had to check it out myself.
Yeah, so I'm totally in with Dom. I'm like, I really don't think it's that great. I know it's sad and terrible to say that, and I'm sorry, but that's how I feel.
No,
I really wasn't impressed by it.
Pretty much everyone feels that way. Reading up on it a little bit, I did a little bit of deep diving on the album because it fascinated me how like the album cover. First of all, start with the album cover. It looks cheap. The album cover looks cheap, and the songs range from boring to awful. That's how I have to describe it. It was produced by Mike Post. I don't know if you know who Mike Post is.
I don't.
He's known for TV music, TV theme music, like Law and Order, The A-Team, and
okay.
Blue.
Cool.
He produced the album. So I don't know if he, getting someone like that to produce a rock album in the 90s
Could have
was the
probably
best
been a bad
idea.
idea. It could of course be potentially a match made in heaven if
Yeah,
you exercise the right creative juices and you could really make something remarkable. But for me, it just
apparently
didn't
not.
happen that way. And I guess for Van
Yeah,
Halen fans all over, it didn't happen that way because
yeah.
if it's as oft hated as you say, that doesn't surprise me because I thought it was really
We
it was like a big liter of Diet Coke and just like oh why am I
well,
drinking this?
yeah, it was the only. I feel bad for the vocalist on that album, Gary Sharon. He's a good vocalist.
Yeah, like
Especially
all
when
the
it's
musicians on the album were solid enough. It's like, all right, well, of course, there's obviously really good guitar playing and really good drumming, but
yeah,
like the bass playing was solid, the vocals were solid, everything about it. It was like this is a solid rock song from song to song, but like it's just there's
doesn't
nothing
work.
magical about it. There's nothing that's really hooking me in. There's nothing unique about it.
Well, here's something about the bass playing on that album. Michael Anthony, the Van Halen bass player, he only played bass on 3 songs, and the rest of the bass was played by Eddie Van Halen. So he was out of there. He was out too.
That's even more amazing for me. I really, I got a lot of respect for that guy.
A little sidebar here. I don't know if you've heard today. Wolfgang Van Halen released a new song. His first solo.
Oh,
song.
I didn't hear that. No.
Yeah, it's really good. It's nice. It's an ode to his father.
Okay.
And it's good. You should check it out. He's probably gonna blow up soon. I think.
Yeah. Yeah, post it in the Rock Talk page.
I will. I definitely will. I was going to post it actually when we started this. I just didn't get around to it. I'll do that afterwards. It's a good song, and it's already like climbing the pop charts and stuff like that. It's really getting a lot of attention, which is great because I think he's going to be he's going to follow in his father's footsteps.
Be like the successful successor.
Right. Yeah. And he was on Howard Stern this morning. He did his first interview on Howard Stern this morning, and he was talking about how he is going to be in charge of the archives, and when the time comes, they will release some more Van Halen stuff. Because apparently, like all good musicians, Eddie Van Halen left a huge treasure trove of musical ideas.
Stuff that was never finished or released. I'm sure there's probably a gold mine of that stuff.
Now, I'm going to move on to our Facebook group, a post that you got to talk about.
Yeah,
this is from Dan Angelo. He says that album by great bands, Awake by Dream Theater.
Ooh.
Let me just read his post.
Okay.
Awake by Dream Theater. There are some great songs on there, but the album on a whole was a letdown. They were under pressure from their label to produce something more mainstream, and they understandably half-assed the bulk of the record. Nothing exemplifies this better than a music video of Lie. I have to disagree completely.
I completely disagree with that as well. I think Awake is one of their strongest albums, and I think it often goes underrated because it's within the context of it came out after Images and Words, which a lot of people are like, oh, that's one of their best albums, and that that's the first album with James Labrie as their frontman, and they got Pull Me Under as the opener, and there's a lot of awesome songs. Metropolis Part 1 is this crazy progressive entourage of just amazing stuff. Then you get Awake and like whatever, and then you get Scenes from a Memory, which is like this great, awesome concept. Like, so I feel so often that Awake just kind of gets like brushed under the rug, and that's really a major letdown is just how much it's not talked about. And I remember like I listened to it, like the first time I listened to it, I was like, oh, okay, it's kind of like their older like 90s stuff, and like it's got some, you got like the mirror and like this cool like playing with different meters and stuff, and it's really interesting. And that's the first album, by the way, that John Petrucci used his signature Music Man 7-string guitar. So a bunch of stuff is written to showcase that, which I think is really really cool. And I remember
it's a lot heavier. It's a lot heavier than Images.
That's what I like a lot about it, because it's like kind of ahead of its time and how heavy it is. Like there's like a lot of use of that low B, not just with the mirror, but in a lot of other parts of the album as well. I think some of the stuff on the opening track, 6 a.m., if I remember right, it's got some real heavy stuff. And I remember like I was getting into Dream Theater like right in the mid 2000s when they were like they Train of Thought was like really big. Then they did Octavarium. They did the whole like world tour like with the Octavarium Orchestra and all that stuff. And I remember like Systematic Chaos was the album that made me like, this is my favorite band ever. Like that's my favorite album by them is Systematic Chaos. And And I remember when the album dropped, there was like a little vlogumentary thing that Mike Portnoy made about the making of the album. And there's like interviews with all the different members of the band. And there's one part of the documentary where James is talking about, just like how fun it is to make the new content for this new record. And he's like, you know what? This is the most fun that I have had since Awake. And I'm thinking, oh, that's interesting to like that the band has like this kind of like really cool nostalgic view of, let me go back and revisit that album. So in recent years, I revisited Awake and was completely blown away. Like, wow, how did I not hear some of this stuff the first time? Awake is one of those albums you don't just listen to once. That's the thing. If you're like going through the discography, Awake is gonna be like a big dud for you, and you're gonna be like, all right, whatever, and then you're gonna move on. But when you go back and listen to it again, something about it, maybe the artwork, and I'm seeing like this, like this like Greek philosopher figure in the mirror, and they're on the moon, and it's like this weird, like it's one of those, like, it just kind of draws you in, and it happened to me. So I went back and like let me listen to it again and kind of take it for what it's worth at face value, and just something about it. The second listen is when it clicked for me, and like each and every song, like I don't think there's a bad song on that record. There's not one that I want to skip.
I agree.
I like how Scarred and Space Divest go hand in hand. It kind of like one leads right into the other. It's one of those albums that like you don't have to listen to it start to finish, because it's not one of those like every song is connected by stuff like that, like transition material. But yeah, it's just fun, because isn't Erotomania is on that, isn't there? Yeah, and that's like one of their best instrumentals like ever, and it's just like you just listen to that one song is worth buying the album, really, because it's just such a staggering showcase of what these guys can do as musicians, and it's just amazing. It's
Sorry,
got
Dan.
It's a lot of there's just so much diversity stylistically. There's so much diversity of like members of the band being showcased. Look at the mirror, like the opening of the mirror is just Mike Portnoy showing off. Like, here's how many different times and grooves I could do under this little 3-note thing that like just I use that song to teach my kids, like, here's what metric modulation is. Here is how you can put 3 notes into like 7 different time signatures. Here's how you can take one simple little idea that's literally just this little Morse code thing, and you can do so much with it. And it's none of the stuff that Portnoy's doing is necessarily complex. It's definitely not rocket science, but the fact that it is just so creatively layered in different contexts, it's just every time, like, it literally puts a smile on my face every time I listen to The Mirror. It's like,
absolutely, I agree. Yeah,
there it is in 4. Oh, I love that. It's so cool. Dream Theater, they're my favorite.
That whole part, yeah.
That's one of their. That is probably my number 2 spot for albums. If not a number 3. It's like right up there with Scenes from a Memory. It's right up there with Systematic Chaos. It's one of their strongest. And I think Awake, this is probably a bit controversial, this blows Images and Words out of the water with what they do creatively, musically, and as far as an ensemble, as far as each of the musicians individually. It's a testament to like what you can do with a real state-of-the-art progressive metal band. It's awesome. So sorry, Dan, I don't think you're on with any of that. Give it a second listen. You might like it a lot more, and hopefully it changes your mind to give it a listen and think, wow, this is really much better than I thought it was.
I agree. I mean, when I first listened to it, it was when it first came out. So I went into listening to Awake loving Images and Words. So when I first heard it, I was like, wow, this is really, really heavy compared to Images and Words. So the first time through, it was probably like, okay, it is what it is. But once I listened to it a second or third time, I fell in love with it, and especially that part in the mirror, that whole part there.
That opening bit is the best.
Yeah, Space Divest. When I got to Space Divest, man, it hit me. I was like, this is amazing. This is an amazing song.
And I love that they foreshadow a little bit of the Space Divest material in the mirror.
Yeah.
They use that same melody and this really cool like dark piano thing that Kevin Moore does and lays down. And I really, as much as Jordan Rudess is a fantastic member of the band, and he's been a staple in all of their stuff since he joined the band for 6 Degrees, and he's one of the absolute best keyboard players of all time. I love Jordan Rudess, but I really think Kevin Moore brought something special to the band in the albums that he was featured on, and Awake, I think, being kind of the pinnacle of that.
I mean, I could be wrong about Kevin Moore, but I think he was one of the original founders of Dream Theater.
He was. He was the original member for When Dreaming Day, Images and Words, Awake.
When they were called Majesty or something, right?
Majesty was the original name, yeah. And interestingly enough, John Petrucci's signature 7-string Ernie Ball model is called the Majesty. That's the name of the guitar.
Yeah.
And it's named after, it's this thing that we were going to be before we were Dream Theater or whatever. But I don't know if Kevin Moore was on any albums after Awake. He might have been on one or two. Oh, he wasn't. Okay. At that point, I think Falling Into Infinity, they got Derek Sherinian.
Yeah.
And then who was it for Scenes from a Memory? Was it Jordan Rudess?
Yeah. That was it. I don't think they had anyone else besides that. I could be wrong, but I think after Derek.
You know what? I got to look that up because I don't remember. I used to know the lineup changes pretty well. They were kind of like my thing, but.
That's okay. We won't crucify you for that. But Awake, I have to say Awake is a great album. Awake is not a bad album. I can't say there's a bottom of the barrel album by Dream Theater. There are ones that are less accessible. There's one, but there are ones that are simpler than others. Falling Into Infinity seems a little bit more straightforward than the other ones are. It's still not a bad album, though. I don't think Dream Theater did a dud yet. As far as Awake goes, like I said,
one of their strongest.
Yeah, I love the album. Yeah. I go back to that one,
and it's not long either. It's one of their shorter albums, so it's a really good introduction to if you want to get into Dream Theater, check it out because it's really good.
Now, a few other things from our Facebook group, I'll touch on real quick. A few albums like Nostradamus by Judas Priest. I haven't really heard that album yet, but Nate says it's terrible. Frank Kadasik, a friend of mine from high school, I've known Frank forever. He mentioned the Whitesnake album, Slip of the Tongue, which came after the self-titled album, the one with Still the Night on it, the one with Here I Go Again, the huge Whitesnake album. After that album, they did an album called Slip of the Tongue, and they brought in Steve Vai as their guitar player.
Ooh,
and again, you would think
guitar player of all time.
Yeah. You can think Match Made in Heaven.
Yeah, it'd be awesome.
There's one memorable track, which is a remake of one of their older songs, Fool for Your Lovin'. Check it out. Jam to that song, man. You'll love it because it's just Steve Vai all over the place, man. He does a great solo. The video's cool. He lays the guitar down and kind of just plays with it like this. And it's neat. But overall, I agree with Frank, though. The album is pretty much a dud. There's nothing memorable on it. It's way overly produced and just terrible. It's just too slick. It's just boring, it really is, except for that song, which is, again, like I said, a remake of an older Whitesnake song. Lenny Darren comes in with some Motley Crue. Generation Swine and New Tattoo are two not very good Motley Crue albums as far as Lenny's concerned. I don't know enough about those albums to say yes or no, but probably not. They probably aren't that great. Now, Motley Crue did a self-titled album in the 90s with a different singer, a guy named John Corabi. That album is excellent. Doesn't sound anything like Motley Crue, but it's an excellent album, and no one cares about it because it was a different singer. It wasn't Vince Neil, and it's really heavy, and it's a really, really, really good album. Smoke the Sky is a really great track off of that, but you'll never hear that. Because that's like a Motley Crue album is like buried, People call it bad. I think it's fantastic. It's almost like a lot of Black Sabbath fans like Born Again, even though you don't.
Oh, let's talk about Born Again, because I was going to bring that up when we were talking about bad Sabbath albums, because, again, it's one of those, you think of this weird, interesting combination of Ian Gillan, frontman of Deep Purple, really iconic rock singer, pairing them up with Black Sabbath. That sounds like a fever dream. So cool, right? I love Ian Gillan. I love Black Sabbath. Let's put them together. And I was totally disappointed. I kind of forced myself to stomach the whole thing because I was like, maybe part of it might be good eventually, but it was just so bad. And even a lot of Ian Gillan's singing is just not his best. It's just a lot of lousy stuff. Very, very crappy mix. You know, you can't even hear the whole band clearly. It's just bad on so many fronts. It's bad in production value. It's bad in performance. It's bad in arrangement. You know, some of the songs are just so stock and boring. And it's like you had so much potential to do something really, really remarkable and really fascinating and bring it in. Cause like you could kind of compare Deep Purple to Black Sabbath a little bit because
Sure, yeah.
a lot of people argue that Deep Purple is, again, one of those like first generation, like definitive heavy metal bands. I never considered them metal, even though they're really heavy and they have some real heavy albums. I never considered them a metal band as much as I considered them a rock band. But
Yeah.
pairing up Ian Gillan with Black Sabbath could have been awesome, and it's just really sad to see that it wasn't. I
I
didn't like that album at all. I hated
I
it.
like the first track a lot. Trashed, the first track I think is fantastic. The
Mhm.
mix is terrible though. I'll agree with you. The mix is just
Oh, it's
awful.
so bad.
Some people really like that album. Some people on our board have
Hey, if
talked
you
about
like
how
it, all power to you. It wasn't my cup of tea. It wasn't.
I think we were when we talked about replacement singers in another podcast. I posted on the
Yeah, we
Facebook
definitely
page
talked
about
about
it.
Born Again at that point.
Yeah, we talked about Born Again, and the people on our group talked about Born Again. Bobby Reese, for one, he talked about how he loves the album. Pretty sure it was Bob that said he really liked the album. And I have to say, I like Trashed. The song Trashed, I think, is great. Uh, People will mention Disturbing the Priest and Zero the Hero, Digital Bitch. They're okay to me,
Yeah,
but it's
I
just
thought
not
Digital
Black
Bitch was
Sabbath. And
terrible.
for you, they're not.
Yeah, no, it's just, I don't know. It's just bad. It's just not good.
Well, let me tell you, it's a better album than Forbidden
And
by
that's
Black
it.
Sabbath. Yeah.
I'll probably just straight up take your word for it and never look at Forbidden. I probably
Now,
won't.
with that said, going back to Black Sabbath, especially the Tony Martin era Black Sabbath, Forbidden's a bad album. But I have to say again and again, Tony Martin, he gets the short end of the stick because he's a great vocalist. And they did, in my eyes, they did one great album with Tony Martin. It's called Headless Cross. If you want to, anyone out there wants to hear Black Sabbath that Ozzy, isn't Dio, isn't Ian, it's not Born Again. Headless Cross from Tony Martin on lead vocals is a very solid, excellent classic rock Black Sabbath album. They lean a little bit too much on like the whole devil thing in that album,
Mhm.
which kind of
Kind of takes
cheesy.
away from some of the magic of it. Yeah.
Lyrically, it's kind of cheesy. There's a lot of talk about the devil and Satan and stuff, but musically, it's a solid Dio-esque kind of Black Sabbath album. It has that
I'd
Black
probably
Sabbath
enjoy
with
it.
Dio kind of feel. It's a Hellas Cross. I always recommend to people that want one more good Black Sabbath album. Or I'll recommend the album they did with Dio before he died under the name Heaven and Hell. If you haven't heard that yet, you should really check that out. If you haven't heard Heaven and Hell, I believe the album is called The Devil You Know. It's one of the last recordings Dio ever did. It was Dio, Tony Iommi, Geezer Butler, and I want to say it was Vinny Appice on drums. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it was Vinny. They did that a couple of years before Ronnie died. Ronnie was probably already diagnosed with cancer when they did
Oh wow.
that album. Yeah, because they did that right after they did that Heaven and Hell tour where they played all the old Black Sabbath with Dio stuff. They went into the studio and wrote a bunch of new songs. If you haven't heard it, it's good. It has like that Dehumanizer vibe to it. If you want to talk about another Black Sabbath with Dio album, that's really good.
Oh yeah, you want to talk about an awesome album that is woefully underrated? We could talk about Dehumanizer.
Well, to me, it's the mix that does it for me. I don't like the mix on it, but other than that, it's a great album.
Yeah, I enjoy it. I like it as it is. That's probably my favorite Sabbath album.
There is a remixed version of it out. I think there's like a remaster that it sounds a lot better.
That's probably the one that I heard because I just pulled it up on Spotify and listened to it. It was probably
I have the original, and it's just the drum sound is not very good on it, and it has this odd mix to it. But it's a great album. It's a really solid album. I still listen to that once in a while. It's excellent. But yeah, The Devil You Know by Heaven and Hell is another solid album. But we're talking about bad albums.
Yeah.
So I don't want to get too much onto, gushing
Yeah,
about
I like
Black
how we
Sabbath.
keep going back to albums that are actually really good.
It's hard to just keep on hammering stuff down,
Yeah, no, it totally is.
But that's pretty much what a lot of people mentioned on our group. Someone mentioned Chinese Democracy.
Mm-hmm.
Come Taste the Band by Deep Purple is a pretty bad album. The Elder by Kiss was mentioned. I kind of like that in a weird way, but I can see where Kiss fans don't like that album.
Yeah. I'm not much of a Kiss fan, so I don't have much to say about that. So I really don't have much input there. But one comment that I saw that really caught my eye was from our buddy Alex, who we featured on our Periphery episode. He said, "I really don't love the new Tool album. We waited so long for it to Shake My Head." And I felt exactly the same way. I remember was I talking to maybe? Yeah, I have a close friend who's a really big Tool fan, and I kind of felt bad because I was pooping all over it. I was like, I like Tool, I like their stuff, and I remember being pretty pumped when they announced that they were going to have this new album, and it finally dropped, and I listened to it, and I was like, oh, that long of a wait time for that? Not really sure I'm feeling it. And I was like, comparing it to like Periphery, where like, like look at just how much more progressive these guys are, and look at how much more interesting and heavy and like just so much more. I'm kind of done with Tool, waiting 14 or so years or however long it was for something that was kind of like what you would exactly expect from a Tool album to be. I'm like, okay. And then this friend of mine tried to kind of sell it. He's like, no, it's one of those, like, you gotta like give it a second and third listen. You gotta like, there's a lot of layers to it. It's very much like, it's probably Tool's best. And, like you really like, just listen to it one more time, do it. So I eventually kind of came around like a week or so later. I was like, let me do another run through of it. And something, again, kind of like with Awake by Dream Theater, something just clicked. And I remember like, wow, this is actually way better than I thought it was. And like, it totally turned it around for me, just to repeat listens. It's one of those albums. It's like an oyster. You have to kind of, you have to crack the shell first, and you got to go through it 2 or 3 or maybe 4 times till you really start to get it. And once I got it and it clicked in me, it made me appreciate it so much more. I was like, wow, this is super strong and super awesome and totally well worth the wait. So those of you, if any of you Tool fans out there feel the same way about the album, like, it was a bit of a disappointment, it didn't really deliver, just keep listening to it. It's gonna turn around for you and give you something a lot different to talk about. And I remember kind of talking about that. I met up with a bunch of old like music teacher buddies, ex coworkers, at like a little get together a couple weeks after that, and it was like I was like so ready to poop all over Tool, and then I listened to it again and like totally just changed my mind, and it was awesome. Really strong album. So if you think it's crappy, go listen to it again, because it's not as crappy as you think.
Yeah, Alex, go listen to it again.
Yeah, Alex, go listen to it again.
I can't say one thing or another about it because I've only heard a few tracks on it. I haven't been able to sit down and really dig into it yet. I do like Tool. I'm not a huge fan. I like them. I can only take them at certain increments because they're very dark and they're very sad and they're very gloomy. I have to be in the mood for that. But, it's good stuff. I do like it a lot. I got to be in the right mood for it. And I haven't really got a chance to listen to the new one yet. Only a few tracks. The one track that I think they released first. I can't remember the name of it because they have weird names for all the tracks, but it was really good. It was really good. I liked it, but again, I can't say yes or no to it because I haven't really heard it yet. Any other bad albums you want to hit?
Yeah, you know what? It would almost be a dishonor if we do this whole episode without talking about the elephant in the room, Iron Maiden.
I wasn't gonna do it.
The band that we're so well known for like loving and being all about and knowing extensively and getting into the history. Now, of course, there's the 2 big ones. There's the 2 that everyone who knows anything about Iron Maiden is going to expect us to talk about. Like, all right, here comes the X Factor. Here comes Virtual 11. Here comes the dark age of the 90s with Blaze Bayley. And let's talk about how bad those albums are. But I actually have something that's really different. I kind of want to avoid those because that's like saying the sky is blue. Yeah, of course. Those
low-hanging fruit, we call it. It's too easy.
Like, I don't even like, that's just to be totally expected. I figured it would be kind of interesting if we kind of excluding those 2 albums.
Okay.
Which which one is like the bad one for you? Which one is your least favorite? Which one's the bottom of your barrel? Let's have you go first.
Man, it's you know what I'm gonna say. It's a two-way tie though, because I like half of No Prayer for the Dying, and I like half of Fear the Dark. If I'm gonna have to pick one though, I'm gonna pick No Prayer because the production I think is worse on No Prayer.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely, and I think it was intentionally shitty for them to do it that way. That was a big part of, I think, Harris's creative, like, let's try to make this like really raw sounding, like poorly produced thing to really kind of spit in the face of all like these like prog music junkies that are kind of jumping on our camp now. Like, no, that's not what Iron Maiden is. And I get why he did it. I mean, I'll never fully get why he did it because Seventh Son was so fantastic, and if they would have just went that direction and became a prog band, that would have been even better. But I'm a prog guy. That's what I like. You know, like, yeah, I'm throwing more keyboards and more symphonic stuff, do all the crazy epic concept album storytelling, religious things, and all that. I loved all that stuff.
It was a big 180. It was a huge 180.
It was an intentional 180, and I can kind of respect it for that. Funny enough, I revisited both of those albums after we talked about we did a Maiden episode a while back. We did like our top 20 and all that stuff, and that was one of the things that you said is like, oh, take half of No Prayer and take half of Fear of the Dark and put them together, you get a solid album. So I thought, let me go through and kind of pick which ones would make that. So I actually made a playlist on my library of No Prayer for the Dark. All right, let me go through. So I went through all of No Prayer and I went through all of Fear of the Dark, and I was like, let me pick out. I was surprised. I only left out like 2 or 3 songs on each album, and it was like I was kind of pleasantly surprised. Like, well, these albums are a lot better than I remember them. There's a lot of really good songs, and there's a lot of really catchy hooks. There's a lot of real bangers of guitar parts and chorus riffs and this and that. And I remember like actually, yeah, there's not really, you know, I mean, it's funny like how bad Weekend Warrior is, that when I think of Fear in the Dark, I think that all the songs are that. Yeah. But that is clearly not true. That's just absolutely not true. There are so many like really good gems in that, and especially, of course, being, you know, one of my favorites, Judas Be My Guide, is on there as well. But like Fear of the Dark is actually a pretty solid one for me. And I was really pleasantly surprised with the material that I found on those albums, because it's one of those, like, you have like a bad track or here or there. If you just take those 1 or 2 real stinkers out, the rest of the album really shines through as like, wow, this is kind of some of their best stuff. So I wouldn't say
you have the list.
Oh, the list of the songs that I picked.
Yeah. I want to hear
this. Let me pull it up quick, because
I would definitely get rid of Weekend Warrior.
Yeah, Weekend Warrior is like the worst song they ever wrote. It is an absolute shit show, and I hate it. I hate them for writing it. It's just such a bad like it's Iron Maiden trying to be Guns N' Roses post Appetite for Destruction. It's like they're trying to be like the worst thing of another band of a totally different genre at their worst, and they succeed tremendously. It is so bad. It's, oh my god, it's, if we did like a top 20 of like the worst, absolutely number 1. Like it's just abysmally bad. It is so bad. So yeah, so funny enough, like looking at my list here, all right, we got pretty much most of the albums are on here. So it's all in order from No Prayer through Fear of the Dark. So we have Tail Gunner, then we have Public Enema number 1, then we have Fate's Warning, The Assassin, Run Silent, Run Deep. I left on Bring Your Daughter to the Slaughter as a kind of guilty pleasure, because I kind of like that song as much as it's like kind of crappy. Like it's really not that great, but I like it. Something about it, I like it. I like the chorus.
I think that song was actually Iron Maiden's biggest hit in England.
That wouldn't surprise me. And then Mother Russia, the closing song on No Prayer, is actually pretty solid.
That's a good song, man.
That's on here. So then we go into Be Quick or Be Dead, which is awesome. Afraid to Shoot Strangers is a very kind of ballad-esque epic. It's pretty good. Fear is the Key, Childhood's End, Wasting Love, The Fugitive, Chains of Misery was one of those like big gems I forgot about. Like, wow, that song really slaps. That song is awesome. And I completely forgot it because it's like, it's kind of bookended by so many other crappy songs. The Apparition made the cut. Judas Be My Guide, of course, is on here because it's my favorite. And then the title track, Fear of the Dark.
Sure. Yeah.
It's awesome. They do it at every show. It's awesome. It's great. So like you can see most of the songs on both albums actually made the cut. There's a total of, it doesn't just have like a number. Oh yeah, 17 songs, an hour and 21 minutes of material is on those two albums that I think is worth it, worth listening to. I was really surprised. Like I really only cut like one or two songs from each album.
Now, a more a better exercise, I would say, or a more difficult exercise would be taking like album standards from like the late 80s, early 90s and fitting just the songs you wanted to keep into that. So you would have 8 to 10 songs on that one album. That's where it makes it a little bit harder to do. If you're just going to pick every song you like from those two albums, okay, so you have
you're going to get a big list of tons of stuff. Yeah,
like I would cut the Apparition, I'd cut the Assassin, I would probably cut Fear Is the Key.
The Assassin is one of my favorites on No Prayer. I love the Assassin.
But as far as like Maiden goes, like which one would you say is worse? Would you say it was
No Prayer, definitely. Yeah. I'd say Fear of the Dark is actually arguably a more solid album. But for me, the big one that I really don't like, that I put at the bottom of my list, next to the Unspeakables, of course.
Oh no.
Is, here we go, hot take, Power Slave.
No!
Yeah! No. Power Slave is my least favorite album out of like their golden age. Because, I mean, you start off with like two of their best songs that they ever did. 2 minutes and then Ace is High.
Right.
And then like pretty much everything after that up until the title track, I don't like any of those songs. I don't like Back to the Village. I don't like The Duelist.
I know you really don't like Back to the Village.
I really don't like Back to the Village. I'm not a big fan of Flash of the Blade. I like the concepts of some of the songs, but I just don't know. They just feel really just, I don't know. They just feel tired to me.
The Duelists is another one.
I don't like it.
Lost for Words is their instrumental.
Instrumental.
To me,
and I think
instrumentals are a waste of time.
To Genghis Khan. Genghis Khan is an awesome instrument.
But other than that, Maiden shouldn't do instrumentals because Lost for Words, that song could have words.
Yeah.
I feel that song
is their best is in the Reformation era when they're doing these big instrumental like bridges in their songs, but there's still like a catchy chorus at the start and end of it. You know, when you get the best of both worlds. But I feel like Lost for Words was just so shoehorned in, like, oh, we haven't done an instrumental since Killers, so let's do one, and we'll just make it a silly title called Lost for Words. And I think it sucks. I don't remember a note of that tune, and I listened to the album cover to cover like less than a year ago. And of course, you know, I got my opinions on Rime of the Ancient Mariner. I really think it's a little overrated and overbloated. It's not my favorite song by them. Power Slave is great. The title track is awesome. I think it's a really cool, the whole like Egyptian theme with the mummy and stuff. I think that's really creative and clever and cool. And they've never really done anything like that since. But yeah, really, if I took the best picks out of Power Slave, it's literally the first two tracks in Power Slave. That's it. The rest of the album, I'd throw in a dumpster and set it on fire in a heartbeat. I think it's really overrated. And that was like one of the big ones. Like every Maiden fan I talked to when I was first getting into them, you got to get Power Slave. You got to listen to Power. That's their best. Dude, Peace of Mind is so much better. Number of the Beast is so much better. All of the stuff on their first two albums is so much better. And that's not even good.
I agree. As far as like the albums from like, the super classic era, so from the first album to, let's say, Seven Son, that whole span, that's probably the one I listen to the least, Power Slave, because you got a couple songs back to back that aren't as good. I still like Flash of the Blade. The Duelists, it's probably, to me, is the weakest song on the album, next for Lost for Words, but that's an instrumental, so I'm not even gonna count that. I never listened to that.
That doesn't even count.
Even when, you know, when I was a kid, man, I would always just, I'm going to date myself now. I'd always fast forward through Lost for Words on my cassette tape because, you know, I like the intro to Flash of the Blade though. It's neat.
I mean, it's decent, but I just
no. You're saying, you're not saying it's like trash like Black Sabbath Forbidden or something, or
no, it's not Weekend Warrior. I can tell you that.
There you go.
Nothing on there is Weekend Warrior. Lost for Words is marginally better than Weekend Warrior.
I agree. I will have to agree there, but you know, and I'm not. I don't even think we even should dig into the X Factor and Virtual 11 because we've talked about this before. You like them a little bit more. You probably like them a lot more than I do.
I like the X Factor. I hate Virtual 11. Literally, I have all the Iron Maiden albums on my iTunes library, and Virtual 11 is not on my phone. It's like it's not worth the couple of megabytes of disk space that it even
The
is.
Klansman is the only thing on that album I like.
Yeah, but just pull up the live one
Yeah.
from Rock and Rio. It's literally better in every way.
I do like Future Real, but I like when Bruce sings it. Again, I like it live.
Yeah.
Future Real, I like. That was a decent opener. Then it just goes right down.
Yeah,
it doesn't come back for air until Clan.
Yeah. It's coming out of the spiral of the sewer.
Yeah, really. That's about it. We don't really.
Such a weak album. It's so bad.
We don't really have to talk about them because we talked about both of them before. I don't really need to.
We don't have to beat the dead horse over that.
Oh, it was pain. It was pain. I was in pain back then. Is there any other bad albums you can think of that you want to touch on?
Oh God. I feel like we covered a lot of the big ones.
Because I mean, we could throw out a bunch of obscure albums that no one ever heard of and say, "Oh, that's bad" or whatever. But
yeah, I'm not really sure how useful that would be.
Yeah, exactly. So,
I think let's the nails on the head with all the big guys.
Yeah, let's move on to our homework from this week.
Yeah, we'll talk about two really good albums by really good bands.
Yeah, every week we give each other a little homework assignment. You get a week to listen to an album you never heard before. I was assigned Periphery 3 Select Difficulty, and you were assigned one of my favorite prog albums of all time, Fate's Warning: A Pleasant Shade of Grey.
Yes.
I want to give that to you first. You can start off talking about what I gave you.
All right, so it took me forever to finally listen to Pleasant Shade of Grey, but when I did, so it's set up, that title is the whole album. It's not, so all the songs are just part of A Pleasant Shade of Grey. So it's, part 1, part 2, part 3. It goes all the way to 12. It's a 12-part piece. It falls just under an hour in length. And I've never heard any Fates Warning stuff before, ever. Never heard the band. It's one of those, like, they're on my shelf. They're on my list. Like, oh, this is a really cool prog band. I should check them out. I'm probably going to really like them. So Jeff mentioned to me, like, oh, it's not going to be like Dream Theater or like prog, but it's going to be kind of progressive, and it's going to be really heavy, and it's going to be dark. And I was floored. I really, really enjoyed it. I listened to part 1, and I get this like real raunchy dissonant guitar chord, and it just kind of, and then this really simple little melody figure comes in that, and it's repeated enough times that I'm sitting here thinking this is probably going to be somewhat of a main motif, a kind of thing that's gonna like let me get this in my head so that I can listen for it when it comes back. And sure enough, it did come back several times throughout the album, and every time it came back, I liked it more. I love that sort of organic style of writing where you take one simple idea and you just sprinkle it through your whole album and do a lot of different stuff with it. Pretty much for the first like 7 or 8 parts, each part was better than the last for me. The further I went into the album, the more I liked it. I got like these real dark, heavy guitar riffs that weren't overly complicated, but they were interesting enough that I'm like, yeah, this is pretty cool. Oh, wow, that's really heavy. Part 3 especially was really interesting. I really like the vocals. When the singer does his first little chorus hook in part 1, I'm like, yeah, I like the singer. I really like his tone. I really like his range. I have high expectations for what he's going to do. The only thing about the entire album that I didn't like was, this is a really specific nitpick, but it's the piano sound. Not the piano playing. The piano was great. I love the use of piano in the album. I love the playing. I love the idea.
That's Kevin Moore.
Oh, is it? Oh,
that's
even more interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot of use of what's called the Phrygian scale, which is this use of like a lowered scale degree to make all of your notes just sound a little bit darker. I don't want to get into like all the theory stuff of explaining what this is. This isn't teacher talk for all we know, but there's a lot of use of Phrygian. There's a lot of use of dissonance. There's a lot of use of these like real crunchy sounds, and the piano playing is like it's perfect. The writing, it's not really anything super difficult or tricky, but it's something that like it lends itself right on top of the whole ensemble's sound, and it's really solid. But the actual piano sound itself is like straight up literally a general MIDI piano. And just from hearing so much like crappy MIDI mock-ups of like video game music and stuff I like to listen to, just hearing it on this like what's clearly a computer trying to pretend to be a piano, it just put a bad taste in my mouth. on that front. I'm like, oh, if they just recorded this on a real piano, it would be even better. So the piano writing was awesome. The piano playing was awesome. The piano sound was trash. And it bothered me every time I heard piano in that album. But every time I was like, oh man, I'd love to hear this like remix, like with, just stick a mic in a Yamaha, but yeah, there was one, oh my God, was it part 7 or 8 where like it gets really, really progressive. There's like a lot of like real interesting mixed meter stuff going on, and it was tough to count. A kind of recurring theme throughout it is these like really dissonant guitar chords that I really enjoyed. Yeah, I thought it was solid from start to finish. There wasn't a dull moment. And next thing I knew, I was like, oh, that's part 12. That's the end of it. Okay, we're done. And I definitely want to revisit it and listen to it 2 or 3 more times, as well as hitting some other stuff by Fate's Warning. Because now I'm hooked. Now I'm like, all right, this is a band I should have listened to yesterday, and or yesteryear, yesterdecade, when I was first getting into progressive stuff, when I was first getting into Dream Theater. I should have checked out Fate's Warning, because I never knew that they existed. I never knew they were a prog band, and I really, 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 really enjoyed Pleasant Shade of Grey. So thank you for sharing that. That was an awesome experience. I really enjoyed it.
I'm glad you loved it, because I love that album so much. It's one of my favorite prog albums. They're one of my favorite prog bands.
I can understand why.
And I'll even say, I'll say the word favorite again. Mark Zonder, who played on that album, is my favorite drummer. The stuff he does is so tasteful and
it was super tasteful.
He's so good. And he's a cool guy too. He's a pretty cool guy. He's recording a bunch of different stuff with a whole bunch of different people now. He's really expanding everything he does, and he's not with Fate's Warning anymore, but the guy they have now is a beast also on the newer albums. The newer albums aren't as progressive as this one. They started off like more of like a straightforward heavy metal band. Until they got the singer they have now, Ray Alder. It was maybe, I think, the 3rd or 4th album is called No Exit. They started to shift a little bit and become more of a prog metal band. So No Exit still kind of has that traditional heavy metal vibe to it. The first album, I believe, with Mark Zonder was Perfect Symmetry. That's where the prog stuff starts really coming to the forefront. Parallels is the next one. That's the one I think you should listen to next week.
Yeah.
Parallels. That's an excellent album. Then after that came Inside Out. After that came A Pleasant Shade of Grey. Now, you talked about that keyboard sound. The next album they did after that was called Disconnected. They went a step forward with that keyboard sound, that digital, weird kind of cyberpunk kind of video game keyboard sound is more prominent in the next album, Disconnected, which is has almost more of an industrial feel to it in parts.
I got a little bit of industrial vibes from Pleasant Shade of Grey, and I really liked that, because I like Tool. I like a lot of that kind of stuff, and I was always kind of hoping to get a little more of that, and I don't know where to look, and this was a great place to start. So if any of you industrial guys, I mean, Tool fans anywhere, you'd probably enjoy Pleasant Shade of Grey. It's got, it sounds like another band that you could easily shuffle. You could put Fate's Warning and Tool on the same concert lineup. Let's put it that
sure.
way.
Oh, yeah.
One of them could open for the other, and they can do like one of these full albums cover to cover for their live show, and it would be awesome. So if you like Tool, you'll probably like Pleasant Shade of Grey by Fate's Warning, and probably some of their other stuff.
Perfect Symmetry, Parallels, and Inside Out kind of have similar sound to it, which is they're more song-based. They're less heavy than Pleasant Shade of Grey. They're less dark. They kind of sound like a more progressive Queensryche on Parallels, Perfect Symmetry, and Inside Out.
See, I would love that. I would totally.
That's what they sound like. That's when I first heard them was on the Parallels album. I think the one of the first songs I heard by them was Stillwater. And I was like, is this Queensryche? Because it sounds a lot like Queensryche, but more progressive. More progressive from that Queensryche Operation Mindcrime Empire kind of era of Queensryche. But yeah, I love Fate's Warning. They're a great band. And I read somewhere, they called the guitar player from Fate's Warning, they call him the anti-Petrucci.
Yeah, a lot of the guitar
he picks his notes,
really simplistic.
Yeah.
But I think it was really effective too.
Yeah. The anti-Petrucci, because he doesn't play a bunch of notes, but the notes he plays are they're meaningful.
Yeah,
not
I
saying,
like
not saying
all the
Petrucci
guitar
isn't.
stuff I heard. I thought the guitar playing was fantastic, and when it was
Yeah.
technical, it was great, and when it was simple, it was great, and when it was heavy, it was great, and when it was light and airy, it was great. All around, it was fantastic. I think it was one of the strong suits of the whole band was the guitar playing. So kudos to you guys, Face Warning. You guys are awesome. I love you, and I'm
So
gonna probably do your whole discography eventually.
I think you should. I think you would really enjoy it.
I think I owe it to myself to do so.
But A Pleasant Shade of Gray, thumbs up. You think you'd listen to it again?
Oh, absolutely. Probably tomorrow. I mean, I really, really liked it. Now I want to listen to it again before I forget it.
Now, my assignment was a band we talked about on one of our earlier podcasts, Periphery. You gave me Periphery 3 Select Difficulty, which these guys, they have a sense of humor. I'll say that right now, because Select Difficulty.
Yeah, they don't take themselves too seriously.
It's a video game thing, Select Difficulty, but it also applies to the album. Okay, my first impression of this album. Okay,
I can't.
I'm gonna say some words. I'm gonna say some words you may think are bad, but they're not. Don't take this in a bad way. First impression of this album, it's confusing, it's complicated, and there's a lot of weird musical choices on this album. None of that is bad, though. None of that is bad, because it challenged me, and it was like, the more I got into it, the more I listened to it, the more I'm like, all right, okay, I'm getting this now. I'm getting the hang of it. You have to get the hang of Periphery. If you're like a first time listener, you're probably not going to get it. You have to get the hang. Yeah,
they're going to
leave get the hang of this band.
They're going to be bleeding out on the side of the street. You're not going to make it.
So okay, like I said, first impressions. The first two songs are like pummelingly heavy. They're just like, they just boom, they just hit you. The Price is Wrong scared me. I was like, oh my God, this is crazy. And it was confusing, but it was meant to be like that. You know, if you dig actually deeper into the lyrics and into the meaning of the song, it's like, okay, I get what he's saying. It's just like, it's confusing and complicated, but there's a reason for it. There's a reason why they wrote it like that, which once I started looking deeper, because I'm a lyrics guy too, once I started looking into like the deeper meanings of these songs, or even just reading the lyrics, I was like, all right, this makes more sense now to me. It's not just one or the other. When you check them out both at the same time, the music and the lyrics, they go together pretty well. There's a great riff in that first song in between the verses. That riff is just so cool. The only and the only thing, and it's me being an old man, I guess. Screamo vocals don't really do it for me a lot of times. And
there's a lot of screaming in P3.
In this song, it sounded like the singer reminded me of my youngest brother throwing a tantrum when he was like 15. That's what it feels like when he got that screamo kind of vocal. It feels like a young kid throwing a tantrum, like that kid that used to be a YouTube kid that was like freaking out because his mother canceled his World of Warcraft account.
Oh, that's
his bedroom. That's what I thought of.
Infamous video.
Sorry. But okay, all right, that's out of the way, because I do have to say the vocal melodies when he does sing are extremely catchy. That guy is extremely talented, because other than like when he screams, because I'm not a big screamo fan, I'm not a big fan of that, but there's so much more he does with his voice that is amazing.
Yeah.
He nails these notes that are crazy high. He has only guy I could think of like over and over as I listened to is Mike Patton from Faith No More. Does a lot with his voice. This guy's like him. This Spencer dude, man, can do stuff that like I'm listening to it and I'm like, I don't know how he's
human. I don't know
how he's doing some of this. You know, just a matter of going from here to there, you know, with his voice, and then pushing it even further. And you can hear he's pushing it, and it just sounds so good. It's so like he sounds like sometimes like that dude from Linkin Park. Sometimes he sounds like him.
Mm-hmm.
And he sounds like the guy from Faith No More sometimes. And he sounds like himself because he has a very unique voice. Mm-hmm. Just, you know, I want to be an old man. The
strongest part of the album, I would say, is him. Biggest.
I'm going to be an old man again and shake my finger. Kid, you shouldn't scream so much. Other than that, it's fantastic. But the third song, Marigold, I was hooked. That's a fantastic song.
Yeah, that was probably their most famous on that album. at
But
the time when it released. That was
the
like
way the news goes,
oh, so catchy.
even better.
So
Even better.
Yeah, beautiful.
Even better. Remain Indoors is great. Catch Fire. We'll talk about your Faith No More influence. That reminds me of like newer Faith No More. Faith No More after they had their popularity spike with A Real Thing when they were doing some really weird shit. Catch Fire, his voice reminds me of Mike Patton, and that's so much. Now, getting to the drummer, who's a complete beast, he made some really, really odd choices of what he's playing. And at first I was like,
typical like gent and like prog metal guy. He's unique.
But at first I was like, okay, I'll go back to The Way the News Goes. In like, I guess the chorus part of it, he's doing this blast beat, okay, and I'm like, wow, that doesn't really fit there. And then I listen to it again, and I'm like, oh, it completely fits there. I can see it now. You talk about something that you have to listen to a few times to get all those layers and hear how they're interconnecting with each other.
The more like you listen to me, the more you hear. It's amazing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh my God. There's so much to it. And that's why I said, at first it's confusing. It'll like to your average music listener, you're going to come into this and you're going to be like, it's like, oh my God, I don't know what they're doing.
You're going to be disoriented.
Yeah. Totally. Until you start listening to, and a lot of it with the prog stuff and the prog metal stuff and the gent stuff and the stuff that like your brother listens to almost exclusively, you have to give it a couple listens and you have to listen deep almost to hear these patterns and how this instrument is connecting to this one. And like I said, just that blast beat he was doing in the Way the News Goes. At first I'm like, oh, that's an odd choice. I wouldn't make that choice. And then I listened to it again. I'm like, I would definitely make that choice. That's exactly what that song needs right there. And Loon is a fantastic closer. The end of the album closes exactly how it should.
They closed a lot of live shows with that too. It's a really
man, it's got a good song.
Yeah, you get the whole audience singing along. It's awesome. It's fantastic.
It's fantastic. I liked it when they were at their strangest, I think. Like but most of it is fantastic. I mean, I'll probably listen to it again tomorrow on the way to work. Because it's a really, really good album. It's not bad at all. It's impressive. And just going onto YouTube and watching them do it live. The drummer has a whole thing with that one cymbal company. I forget which cymbal company he's.
Oh, I don't remember.
But there's a bunch of videos, and Loon is one of them. It's just they're just the six of the guys in the room, and they're just playing it live. Sounds fantastic. And I can't talk about. I love people who can sing well, and I can't talk about Spencer enough. I mean, he's fantastic. He's what a great voice that guy has. Just the flexibility. Going back to him screaming, how he can scream, but he can also sing, and he can sing well. And it's just
and all the choir arrangements and stuff like that, all like the backing tracks, it's all him. He does it all. He arranges it all.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, he's a monster. Amazing. Yeah, my favorite singer alive right now. Totally.
He's really, really good. He's really good. He has a very, very comfortable feeling to his voice. It's almost like he could go join the Jonas Brothers and sing for them.
He can sing anything. There's really nothing he can't do, man. He could do
like when he's singing,
he could do R&B. He could do whatever.
And I don't know, has he done anything like that? Because I could see him doing like an R&B thing, like a Justin Timberlake kind of thing.
I think we touched on this really briefly in the Periphery episode, but he did launch a solo project recently. I forget what it's called, but it's got a little bit more of that kind of feel to it.
I listened to that a little bit. Yeah. Okay. I'll go back to hearing that because, like I said, his voice, his clean voice it's very poppy. It's very like I could see him sexy. Singing in like like a new pop band, like a new pop rock band, like a almost like a Fall Out Boy or Panic at the Disco.
He's right.
I know everyone's cringing right now, but I'm saying like that's a very
those bands have great singers and they have great catchy vocal melodies and they're awesome bands. And if you're not into them, you're lost, man. You're missing out.
I agree.
I've gotten a lot of exposure to those bands from like doing a lot of teaching, like with my kids.
Well, yeah, you have to. You're gonna
like,
do that.
Death of a
If you're
Bachelor is so catchy. Oh my god.
any kind of musician, if you're any kind of musician that's gonna, not be in your own little hole, you're gonna hear this stuff because it's all around you, and
And it's all
it's
good
not
stuff.
all,
There's nothing wrong
it's not
with
all
it at
bad.
all. No, it's
It's
great.
not all bad.
Great music.
But yeah,
And it gets so played, it's like, oh, I've heard this 1,000 times,
right,
I'm sick of it.
right. Yeah, Periphery 3 select difficulty you will not hear on radio. It will never. Periphery was not a band that will ever be like that, and that's fine. These guys, they cut out their own niche, and they're doing fine. They're doing well,
Yeah.
as far as I can tell, and that is a fantastic album. I'm gonna go check out what was the one, the Juggernaut? Was that
Yeah.
their
That's like a
concept
double
album?
concept. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
the big crazy one.
I'm gonna check that
came out
out.
before P3.
Right. Yeah, I'm gonna check that out. Just because
You'll probably like that even more if you like the more kind of off the wall, like when they're like doing like weird stuff. That one and their most recent P4, there's like a bunch of like they really do some weird different stuff, and you'll probably love every minute of it.
Yeah, I listened to P4, but that was like on the way home from a gig, so it was like 3 a.m.
Yeah,
and,
you probably didn't process it all entirely.
Yeah, I mean, it was in between me and your brother, shooting the shit about the gig, and we're listening to it. Like, well, every once in a while, he would stop talking or stop me mid sentence and be like, "No, listen to this part," But other than that, like, I gotta give P4 a good listen. Like I did this. This was excellent. So there you go. I give it a thumbs up. Definitely check it out if you like any kind of like progressive metal. If you like progressive metal, you gotta like this. That's
yeah. You can't not like it. It's got something for you somewhere.
Yeah, somewhere, right? Yeah.
And then that something will draw you into the rest of it.
So, anything else you've been listening to this week?
Oh, you put me on the spot. What else have I been listening to? Oh man. I redid some Maelstrom, of course.
Of course.
I redid Black Sails at Midnight with a friend because I wanted to expose other people to pirate metal. So I did that. I did the Fates Warning album. I'm still on my writing kick. I'm still working on writing some stuff. So I've been listening back to the things I've been working on, like making part of a tune, listening back to it and thinking, okay, what can I add to it? What can I take away? What can I change? So I've been listening to a lot of my own stuff, as narcissistic as that may sound. It's part of the writing process for me. So that's
you're working on your stuff. That's good. You're being creative.
Yeah. So got a couple more coming soon. The next week or two, I'm gonna have another track or two done. Of course, I've been doing a lot of video game music as well. So that's always been a thing for me. I'm trying to think if there are any specific artists or albums or things that I checked out that are new. I don't think so much this week. As in previous weeks, where I was a little more voracious of like really trying to get a lot of different stuff and kind of just continuously feed my metal sweet tooth.
Well, other than Periphery, that's pretty much all I listened to. I only listened to one other album this week, which was the new release from the band I really like, the gothabilly band Ghoultown from Dallas, Texas. They just released a new album called The Curse of El Dorado, which pretty fantastic if you like that kind of stuff. Has a punk western rockabilly vibe to it. It's hard to explain. You just got to listen to it. It's good stuff.
Cool.
And that's all I got for you, man.
Yeah, well, there we go. So those of you that are tuning in, thanks as always so much for your support and your continued contributions to our conversations, for all your posts, all your shares, all your likes, checking us out on YouTube. As always, check us out, Pansy Podcast Productions. We have our Rock Talk show. We have a bunch of other, Jeff has a bunch of his stuff on there as well. We're going to throw a couple of kind of side fun episodes about movies and things like that. We have our Teacher Talk show where myself and Russ Downey, talk a lot about, like teaching private lessons and, music instruction in the public school setting and things that we like about it, things that we want to change. So that could be interesting if you're into that. It's a little more specific for teachers and such. The Rock Talk show is a lot more like kind of catch-all. Like anyone who likes music should check this out and get exposed to lots of different artists and albums and bands and genres and stuff you've never heard about before, and just keep on listening to good stuff. At this point it is so easy to just go online and find things and go down that proverbial rabbit hole. So And we're all still, dealing with this quarantine. We're all still spending a lot of time at home, and that's only going to continue for the next couple months until, things get figured out and that. So keep listening, keep on rocking, and keep tuning in. We got more to come.